Hey guys, welcome back to the Ava Technology Show. Hope you're well. Today we are going to dive into our latest weekly update release and share with the guys a few questions and answers, and we'll dive into the intricacies. Before we do, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, do all those amazing things. We really appreciate it. And just to share with you guys before we dive into the Q&A, the updates we've had so far this week are the configuration of the new model that we've switched over, the LFM 2.5. We've added a logo next to the chats. We're now able to copy user messages and a bit of work around context management. So a lot of heavy lifting behind the scenes that's been happening. And hopefully it will brings out a better user experience. And of course, listen, guys, don't forget, if there's features and things that you'd like to see on the Whisper app, don't forget to pop it in the comments and let us know. So let's dive straight into it. Welcome back to the show, guys. How are you all doing?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, really good, really good.
So, Will, we've been shipping updates every week. What's made this one particularly different?
I think this one's been a long time coming, to be fair, because with Whisper and with any app, it's an evolution of development. And the surface answer to what's different about this one is normally we try to ship something visually and we try to talk about kind of visual stuff. But this one has been a really heavy behind the scenes one, which is not necessarily that interesting to show you, but it solved an awful lot of underlying issues and niggles that had surfaced in a few issues and reports that people had given from using the app. They all stemmed from this idea of context management, and it's really, really important to get that right with smaller models. So this one was particularly different because we did a huge context review of how the models handle what you put into it and what you get out of it, and we've solved most, if not all, of the problems for now that we found, with that.
Awesome, fantastic. And Matt, the old version would often cut off mid-conversation. What was actually happening there?
So one of the major pain points that we have addressed is when you're having a really long conversation, quite a lot of our users were finding it would forget the very start, or it would eventually hit a point where it wouldn't even be able to respond at all. And this is because once you've had a long enough conversation, the amount of compute, the amount that your phone had to do, it just wasn't capable of delivering on, not with the current solution that we had. And so a big part of what we've done is when you're having a really long conversation, we don't hold on to the very start of it, and we do what's called a sliding approach.
Okay, awesome. And we also had a model switch, didn't we, Will? So I think we all sort of switched from, was it Llama to LFM 2.5?
So this was a couple of weeks ago now, or last week, that we switched the model out initially. However, we've continued to work on it. A lot of the symptoms that people would describe to us is that, as Matt said, you'd have a model that would just stop responding eventually, or it would forget and get confused about where it was going. And there's several problems there. One was just the base model itself. So that is, we were using Llama 3.2, 1 billion parameters. It's a very old model. Old in terms of is relative in the AI world. Old for the AI world. So one, you were a little bit stuck and stunted, there. So we upgraded it last week to LFM 2.5, which is a much more modern model. It's about 3 times as good on all the relative benchmarks as Llama 3.2 was, even though it's only a tiny bit bigger at 1.2 billion parameters. So this actually just shows a huge intelligence boost as it was. However, our work with that model hasn't been finished. Well, wasn't finished last week. We needed to do a lot more configuration stuff to make the model run optimally. The thing with AI and models is that we don't really have necessarily a massive standard to how they should be set up and how they run. They don't all run the same. They all require different parameters. They all require different variables in order for them to run optimally. So what we did this week is then further optimize LFM 2.5 for real devices with things like context limits, with things and the different variables that these models take in. It's quite technical. But what it means is that when you actually use LFM 2.5 now on your real device, you're going to see a much faster, more intelligent experience. It's all still relative to the size of the model, so expectation setting, but it's a drastic improvement over Llama 3.2 1B was.
Brilliant. And on the subject of context management, Matt, we're now warning users when the context starts to fade instead of hiding it. Why transparency? Why are we doing this? Is it transparency, or or is it for some other reason? Because obviously a lot of apps wouldn't necessarily sort of show this.
So this is in reference to now, if you're having a really long conversation, we've added a tiny bit of UI in the app that says, you've got a very long conversation here, you should consider creating a new one. And this kind of transparency is just us bridging kind of the gap between what you can do and what you might get a better experience out of. And the reality is, the longer your conversation is with AI, the more messages that AI has to see and process when it's replying to you. And that does slow it down. And there is then a point where, as we said earlier, we've got a sliding approach where your first messages might actually not be included in a long enough conversation. And so obviously that's going to have a couple of effects. And we're going to be spending, I think, over the coming weeks, some more, like putting in some more research into how we can improve that quality. Because there are other little approaches we can then begin to do to try and reintroduce some of the key concepts you might have had in an earlier message. But ultimately, these are all our workarounds to try and bring the best value we can for a longer conversation, but there are limits to that. And so a new chat is always going to be better once you've hit that threshold.
So, Will, in terms of the context management, what becomes possible now that we're sort of, we're tackling this issue, and like Matt was sort of touching on there, we'll be able to explore other avenues as well.
Definitely. One of the things is, although we have these warnings for context management, that is again just to give a user a more seamless experience generally, or at least a more notified experience. Before, if the app just went wrong, it just went wrong, and the symptom is it just stopped responding. So although we have warnings in there, if we have proper context management, what that allows us to do is, one, have a long range seamless experience. You should just be able to chat forever. But beyond that, if you can manage context properly within the realms of large language models, or this one's a small language model, then you can squeeze more and more intelligence out of it. If you properly give it the right information and you have a strategy behind how you give it the information and how it's presented, then you can often get much better results out of smaller models. A large model like ChatGPT, for example, GPT 5.3, I think we're on now, you can pretty much give it anything and it will do its best and probably understand what you're trying to say. It's quite good at interpreting input. However, with a small model, it's not so good. It's still surprisingly good, but you have to do a lot more heavy lifting on the back end to give it effective results. So what this does is position us in a place where we can start to explore much more complex behaviors with the models, much more complex tool uses, and everything like that, which will really elevate Whisper as an experience and put it up, hopefully, alongside some of these more mainstream chat apps that you're used to seeing.
And just sort of follow up from an engineering perspective, how hard is this on a live app? When we're talking about on-device AI.
The live app doesn't necessarily come into it massively. I mean, you have a version of Whisper on your phone, and then when we're ready, we push an update, and you get that new version. So we don't really have to worry too much about users, having a dip in service or losing access, because everything is on their device anyway. We just give them a new download, and they download it and they get it. That's not to say there isn't a lot of engineering work that goes into doing something like this, which is swapping out models or optimizing context, optimizing model configuration. There is a lot. It's also not an exact science, which is something that people aren't necessarily aware of. There is an awful lot of trial and error and testing. One of the things that's an ongoing multi-week project at the moment is benchmarking these models. So if we make a change to the configuration or the underlying model, we need to be able to run that through some sort of benchmark to see, did we actually improve it or did we not? So that's another big thing. So it doesn't affect live users. However, what happens is it takes multi-weeks, multi-people, multi-input from everybody to pull it off and get the experience that we want to deliver to people.
Awesome. And Matt, last final question. What's the sort of hardest technical problem you've had to solve or overcome so far?
I'd say I wouldn't say there's been like a singular particular difficult problem that we faced. I would say that because we're working in a very fringe area right now, I think we're constantly finding maybe a lack of documentation or a lack of clear guidance for us to follow. So there's definitely an exploration and research and intuition that as a team we have to follow. And that probably is the hardest part. I mean, obviously breaking down our tech into its various components and working on those individually has its challenges. I think context management is going to be a big challenge for us over the coming weeks, but I wouldn't say that in itself is the challenge. It's definitely the fact that we're so fringe.
Awesome. Awesome. Brilliant. Well, that's awesome, guys. Thanks so much for sharing that with the audience. It's going to be interesting to see what everyone's got to say, and also to see if anyone's actually downloaded the latest version and let us know what their thoughts. Because we also actually, one little mention we forgot to talk about was we've added the little icon on the chats, which is obviously very technical, but it's a nice little visual styling, which I think which adds a little bit of flavor to it. So that's good. But yeah, well, listen, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for watching. Like I said, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and let us know what you think. Let us know if you've managed to check out the Whisper app yet. If you haven't, we're on the App Store, Google Play, and you can find all the links either in the description below or visit the website and you'll find it there. But for now, yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to catching up with you on the next one. Take care, guys.